Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every week we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Hello, my loves, and welcome to the show. In today's modern world, women are selling themselves short, prioritizing the mundane over the magical in order to secure the love, approval, and safety of a spiritless society, instead of living as their magical, radiant, powerful selves. So I've created a free 7-day challenge over on my website to help liberate your secret witch and begin to reclaim your powerful majesty. Head to www.secretwitch.co.uk and sign up to the newsletter for your free copy. My guest today is the beautiful Charlie Merton. Charlie began teaching yoga in 2011 after a decade of self-practice. Since then, her style has evolved into a slow creative hatha and breath-based flow practice. She offers a unique combination of integral practices in which people chant, breathe, move and relax deeply into their bodies. She has a master's in music psychotherapy and is certified in various yogic disciplines such as Sivananda, yin, restorative, yoga nidra, pranayama, Kundalini and Tantra, as well as being a certified crystal and sound therapist. She runs her own yoga practice in London and also enjoys playing her many gongs. I can't wait, let's dive in. The wonderful Charlie. I've been attending your beautiful yin yoga lessons for a while now, and I have to say I am delighted to have you on the Secret Witch Show, as your classes are such a beautiful, witchy, medicinal infusion of magic. And I really love how you call everything together. It's like not just one thing, it's like a real collection of, just magic, like shadow work, like the elemental influences, the moon cycle, ritual, breath work, yin. It's kind of lots of different stuff thrown in, and sound obviously. So it's kind of all those sacred practices that can create transformation in a body. So I'm really excited for this, and I know we kind of went back and forth on the topic for this a little bit, and we were just chatting about that prior to recording. But we kind of magically arrived at the topic of listening to the body, which is so important in the secret witch's journey, because so often as people enter the journey towards reclaiming their powerful majesty, they're actually really disconnected from their bodies for many different reasons, and usually always understandable because of the kind of conditioning of the society that we live in. And yet the body is kind of really the only place where transformation can occur. So until we kind of ground ourselves back in them, we can't really create conscious magic. So I'm really excited to kind of hear about your journey. So I guess the best place to start, and obviously welcome you, is just invite you to share a little bit about your journey. And so thank you for being here, and I'll just hand it over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for that lovely introduction as well. I think where to begin, and as T.S. Eliot says, the ending is in the beginning and the beginning is in the end, and it all flows into each other. In that sense, I've always been, from a very young age, working with sound and music, explored music, and in an explorative way, as much as being schooled in that way as well. At the same time, I went to school with in primary school with an Indian girl, and we used to spend time together. And her mum was a yoga teacher, and her dad was a Vedic priest. And I started to become very immersed in traditions of what are also aligned with yoga practices, with deity worship, hearing mantras a lot, and playing with different shapes, and just doing things in a way that I wasn't even aware of what I was doing. It was just what I did when we went and played together. So it had a deep grounding in me from a young age. And from that point, I guess the seeds were planted. Beyond that, I explored my music. And when I was at school, I was bullied. And as you spoke about being disconnected from body, I disconnected. I became very good at dissociating from myself as a way of handling what was happening at the time, threw myself into music because that gave me a solace. It gave me a way of expressing myself in a way that I didn't feel I could express myself in other realms, through other communication. So music was a great tool for me to hone my struggles at the time. And yet at the same time, I was still operating, because music in a way could be very heady and very complex. So I was very disconnected from my body. But what did help me was I trained, particularly I played the piano, but I specialized in playing the trumpet. And what the trumpet did was really connected me to my breath. So even though in some way I was having this disconnect, I was still very much connected with that essence of my breath. And the breath was obviously a huge part of playing the trumpet, because you need a good pair of lungs to be able to play the trumpet. And I then took that to university. I played and did a performance degree, did performance and composition. And I was very lucky in the degree that I was doing, that there were a few people each year who got selected to go and study their instrument, their discipline in other countries. And I got to go and study in California for a year, which gave me the opportunity. It was a wonderful experience, and it totally broadened my horizons, going and being in California, where at that time, gosh, in 2001, it gave me this opportunity to be in a very spiritual environment, very culturally rich, and the people I was surrounded by playing in orchestras and bands, they were naturally curious and into you might call it new age stuff. To me at the time, it felt very curious and new, and at the same time felt very aligned with how I was feeling and how I was thinking, and the way I'd been so disconnected from my body. I remember a woman in the orchestra coming up to me, like literally a week after I'd been there. She was a lovely woman, and she said to me, she's like, "You're like me, you feel things like me." And she basically said, "I can see your aura, and I can see that you feel very deeply, but because you feel very deeply, you've disconnected from yourself." And we just became great friends, and she taught me a lot and started to guide me and help me to reconnect to myself in a way that, especially being in another country, I kind of felt like I was able to dive into the me that I knew I was, rather than having the expectations and the restrictions of the me that I had to be in the UK, and especially having grown up being a shell of myself, having been bullied and didn't feel like I could fully express myself. So being in that environment, and then suddenly someone seeing me and actually giving me the vocabulary for stuff that I could feel but hadn't been able to process and couldn't make sense of, was a huge key to me starting to explore a whole range of practices a little bit deeper. One of those practices being yoga, swimming. I started swimming there, also working with crystals and becoming more aware of the spirit world and working with healing practices. And that just opened up this whole doorway. And from there, I came back to the UK, completed my degree, felt like I really didn't belong here at all. And part of that, once I finished my degree, I was kind of looking for, okay, how do I get back? Because I again felt, coming back, I felt like I'd been put in a cage again, even though I had that year of embodied freedom. In a sense, I'd tasted it, but couldn't extract it and be that in this environment. So an opportunity came up very soon after I finished my degree to go and work in Japan. So I took myself to Japan, working over there, and it was a very different experience to being in California. Not bad, not better, not worse. It was just, it just, we get the experiences we need, I think. And that gave me more of a taste. I was within being in Japan, I came into contact with a lot of Reiki, obviously, with the being a Japanese healing art. So that became a further exploration. And while I was there, I developed a relationship. We ended up getting married. It wasn't a successful relationship. It was probably the relationship that sparked a lot of growth, but a lot of challenge. And as a result, going through a challenging divorce really helped me in a sense that I threw myself into a yoga practice and my healing work, in terms of healing myself and my own traumas, through crystal healing, through shamanic work, and all of these were happening coterminously, interweaving with each other. At the time, I saw them as separate things. They were just different things that I was doing and hadn't really created the connect in my head, but everything was working intrinsically and in synthesis, I guess. And when I chose to separate from my husband, it was a very challenging time because my father disagreed with my decision and chose to disown me at that point, and said to me I was no daughter of his if I chose to leave my husband. Wow. Which was a very challenging time, but it also freed me, because I'd been spending my life kind of doing the things that other people wanted me to do. I'd been doing things to people please, especially my family. And I remember just before I got married, I had this strong feeling that it wasn't the right thing to do. And I spoke to my family, and they were just telling me what they believed was the right thing for me, but they were speaking from their perspective, not my perspective. And I can see that now. However, at that point, everyone was saying to me, you're doing the right thing, you've just got cold feet. He loves you. No one asked me how I felt about it or if I loved him. I think I was very young when I got married, I was 23. But that point where I felt like my family were not there for me at the time I needed them the most, or in a very intense time, it actually allowed me to completely explore all of these different possibilities, these different interests that I developed and been exposed to when I was in California, and it was actually coming back that I felt like I couldn't express that because of constrictions, of beliefs, of what I thought my family would think. And so in a way, it's the greatest challenges that bring us the greatest transformation. And that was what that time really taught me. It threw me into these practices that I became exposed to at the right time, because they were there when I needed them the most. And that became my anchor, that became my support, and really pivotal in my shift, I guess, my path, as my path changed. Sorry,
Wow,
that was very long
No,
explanation. It wasn't very distilled, but
no, and it doesn't need to be. It was it came out perfectly actually, and thank you for sharing that, because I think it just really highlights how, like you said, within our darkness is often our gold, and it's almost like that really pointed you to be able to shine as your truth, I guess. And actually, it's really funny that we're having this conversation, because my story is very, very similar to yours. So yeah, it's really synchronistic that we're here talking about the same sort of experiences. Yeah, wow. So what strikes me about that is that kind of very early on you were on that kind of very soul aligned path straight away with the music, and yet it then kind of got disregarded through your life, but there were still glimpses of it. I just wondered whether you could speak a bit to that, because I think that's something that the Secret Witch probably understands and kind of resonates with. And I guess, how does that tie into the body and the disconnect with your body, if that's even a question? Does that make sense?
it does make sense. And yeah, it's there was always the undertone, the undercurrent there, and part of it was because I didn't feel like I could fully express myself, and partly because the few times I did share my voice, I felt like I was punished for it. So then I almost silenced myself so that I became invisible, which is almost like the story of the the alchemist, who's the Joker. So you kind of put yourself in a position where you aren't what you appear to be, out of fear. Out of
Yeah.
fear.
That was my next question, was almost like, because I'm a firm believer that we create our experience of life all of the time, whether kind of good or bad, and it takes a lot of, I guess, majesty to own that. But it feels like, yeah, it's like my question was, why create that? And I guess fear is one of the biggest reasons that we do end up creating what I call, when I talk about the Secret Witch, like kind of the mundane life over the magical one, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think part of it was fear, and I think also part of it is, well, I think now it all comes down to fear, because it has lots of permutations, and fear is a big thing. It was fear of not being accepted, fear of not being loved, fear of being different, which I always was. And the key thing really is that I was always trying to fit into a place that I didn't belong in. To be accepted by a family who love me dearly but don't really understand me and don't understand how I'm put together. And what's really interesting is as we kind of go through history, I there's a great aunt who, like me, was the outlier in the family. And there's a lot of similarities. So she was one of the first education psychologists. This is going back to the 40s, 50s, in the UK, and did a lot of very similar work. And on her departure from this world, letters were found by my aunties, which were asking them to be mindful of the things that they would find in her house, which were very connected to the Theosophical Society and the spiritual work she did. She was very much part of spiritualist churches and healing work, and this life that she had that people didn't know about. And my mum shared these letters with me because of my work and what I'm doing in the world, and just thought that this would help me to find my place within the family as that outlier. And she too was also the only other musician in the family. Wow. So it's really interesting that thread is what's kind of the connection on the surface, is the acceptable connection, the music as being something that a lot of people relate to, but yet the undercurrent is actually the deep feeling work, the deep spiritual work. Now, how that comes into listening to the body, gosh, my body was telling me all sorts, especially when I was in Japan. And when I was being bullied, I just totally disconnected. I was very good at dissociating and going off to another planet at the drop of a hat, to be able to cope with what was going on at the time. And that was a defense mechanism that became very destructive for me in later life, because I could very easily check out of a situation and leave my body.
I think that's something that a lot of secret witches would resonate with, because that's probably their experience. And to be honest, it's quite scary when you first go into the body, when you're kind of not used to listening to it, and you're kind of used to dissociating with it. So I guess this would be really helpful for them to hear.
Good. I'm glad that you feel it's helpful. I remember having all sorts of feelings in my body when I was about to get married, and it was literally like my body was convulsing. I was feeling sick all the time. I was having panic attacks, all of these things that I was ignoring and putting down to other things. On a deep soul level, I knew, because I was asking these questions. I was asking for permission, almost seeking out with my family, saying, I don't want to do this, and asking for permission to not have to do it, and someone to say, it's okay, you can change your mind, you don't have to go through this. And almost didn't have enough faith in myself and my own instincts, because I was still seeking permission. I was still people pleasing, and my body paid the price. Like literally my body absolutely paid the price, because I became very ill.
I was going to say, how did that show up physically in the body?
I was getting a lot of anxiety. Anxiety was the main expression. I was having a lot of panic attacks, and especially because even through everything, I was always playing the trumpet. Breath was always, I was always a good breather because of the swimming and because of the playing the trumpet. And I could barely breathe. And so that was, breath is everything. And that's really what led me to doing what I do now, in the sense of teaching yin in particular, but in a breath-led way, and really using people to look at the breath to almost guide them to what's going on a deeper level. Because the breath is a very is the most gross aspect of prana. So it's telling us what is actually happening on a very subtle level, if we choose to pay attention to it. Now, my body was giving me all of those signals, but I wasn't connected enough or aware enough, or just able to recognize the signs that, my body was giving me these absolute key signals. And I just didn't have enough information or enough faith in myself to go with that, and wasn't necessarily even anything I'd been taught either. It was just I'd come from a family that were quite cerebral and very much just not really into working with the body in that kind of way, or that aware. So that then manifested a little later on. So I was in the throes of getting divorced, and at the time, it's 2010, I was having one of my dissociative moments where everything was quite overwhelming and just dealing with a lot, and I fell down a flight of stairs. When I was at my old workplace, I used to work for a long time in recruitment to pay off my divorce debts. And I fell down a flight of stairs and embedded my head in a concrete wall, dented the wall, fractured my skull and bruised my brain. And that was ironically what brought me back into my body. So that accident was the big wake up for me. That cracking of my head was literally a cracking open. Wow. And I had an out of body experience at that time, where there were so many people around me, but I was unconscious. And my old boss at the time, we were going into a meeting together, and I remember him saying to me, and I felt like he was saying, are you okay? Are you okay? Respond to me, and was using my name a lot. And I remember speaking to him from out here, saying, I'm fine. Yeah. I wasn't fine. I wasn't communicating. I was on a different plane altogether. Wow. And I have that very, very clear memory of that happening. And I gained consciousness in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. but that was a huge moment for me in terms of, I know how I fell down the stairs because I dissociated. I just left my body in that moment and then ended up at the bottom of the stairs. And from that point, embodiment became a huge focus for me in terms of how all of these different ingredients. So from the crystal healing and learning, I learned about feng shui within crystal healing and working with the power of the elements and the elemental field and meridians. That was a key part of learning all about that, and that within the yoga, and everything started to piece together in a way that I started to learn to trust the instincts of my body and learn to listen with my body to give me the information that I needed to just start to feel into different things in life. So not just about, the different things you're putting in your body. How is your body responding, rather than just eating certain things because that's what we do. It's how's my body responding to this when I'm eating in the day, finding rhythms and rituals and routines, and how your body aligns with those things, how you are responding to certain people, how we are finding alignment with what we're doing for work, how are we with our dharma, effectively, how you're following your path. And it gave me
just in case people are listening to this and not really knowing how to begin that process, like how to begin listening to the body, is there anything you can speak to in terms of that? Like, how do they begin to know? I don't know whether there's any kind of, what comes to mind for me is kind of really listening to sensation within the body. And again, people might not even know what that looks like. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really good question. And I think, honestly, it's so individual. I think it depends on lived experience up to that point and what you've grown up around, what you're used to. If you are used to being around nature, it's going to be a very different experience to if you've grown up in a city. And so I think it's going to be quite individual for a lot of people. But the one thing that we all do have, like you say, is a body. So listening to the different sensations in the body. So that's where simple breath awareness comes in. And for example, closing your eyes and feeling something so simple as the sensation of the air touching the tip of the nose, and then the temperature of the air. And then you could take that, where do you feel the breath in your body? Do you feel, where's the entry point, the access point? Do you feel it first in your throat? Do you feel it first in your chest, in your belly? So just becoming curious about different sensations, different feeling tones, like self-massage, touching your body, squeezing your arms, feeling that quality of, you've got a nose on your face, but when you touch your nose becomes a different thing. You feel it, and it's squidgy, and it's got its bony bits, and it's got its fleshy bits, and having that sense of exploration with your own body, and starting to be curious about every part of your body, so that you develop this intrinsic relationship and realize that there are all these connected parts, that this mystery of this body, which is a marvel, and there's multiple molecules within the body that are working in conjunction with each other at any one point in time, just to keep the system alive and working and healthy and balanced. So when we can dive into that experience, simply, the access point might be the breath, it might be through touch, it might be through seeing if you can feel your liver, simply placing your hands to the area of your liver on the right side, for most people on the right side of the lower ribs, or onto your stomach, and see if you can feel the difference between what it feels like underneath your right hand, what it feels like underneath your left hand, in terms of the energy of the liver and the stomach and the different jobs that they do. Or even bringing the hands onto your back and feeling your kidneys. So there's so many ways that we can explore, and like I said, it will be quite individual. Other ways might be standing in garden or on the grass barefoot and feeling the cold, if it's a cold day, underneath your feet, the squidginess, the different sensations underneath the feet, as something that brings you directly out of the head and into body. Another great way is through, what's become my speciality in a way, is sound through vibration. That's why I love gong baths, because they're such a powerful experience. It's so resonant in the body that it helps to land you either in or out. Actually, it can work both ways, but that experience of vibration and working with the vibratory field, you're vibrating all of the cells in the body. It becomes a very alive experience.
I think for me as well, and this is just me personally, like I went to study yin as well in Bali, and that was really powerful for me, funnily enough, just after as I was going through my divorce. But I think for me, yin yoga was one of those modalities that has you really inquire into your body and the different sensations that are arising as you're kind of holding these poses for a long time, because often that's a key way to find a resistance, or it was for me anyway. And also to see that we can move through those resistances in a way that kind of we have autonomy over our nervous system. For me, that was something that was quite powerful, just seeing that we can kind of build that safety for our nervous system to become calmer.
Yeah, and it's also it is a practice, and part of that practice is to get better at feeling everything rather than having things that we label as good or bad. It's allowing for that curiosity of what's arising and how do I hold that level of discomfort, because really it's a practice for life. It's to help give us skills for life, because we have these difficult experiences that come up that invoke challenging emotions and challenging, effectively. I'm going off a little bit. One of my teachers, Harish Wallace, says about emotion is simply a feeling tone in the body that you give a name to. So that different emotion might be labeled differently depending on what is actually happening in the external world, but the feeling in the body is the same thing. So whether you're actually, Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about in How Emotions Are Made, it's like we have these different sensations that come up, and how, whether you diagnose that in yourself as butterflies in your stomach because you're anxious about something, or a grumbling in your stomach because you're in a bakery and can smell something that's really tasty or smells really tasty. It's like the mind then puts its interpretation onto that depending on the circumstances you're in. But if you can bring it down to that basic level sensation and stay with that before you get the mind involved, that, I think that's a really interesting practice to work with. And that's why I think yin is so powerful, because you are working with that bodily sensation and being able to be at ease within the discomfort as the levels of discomfort arise, get better at feeling, look at, okay, what are the feeling tones that are coming up in this shape, and be able to work with what the body is presenting, to the sense of, is it helpful for me to stay here? You go into that level of self-inquiry, or actually, do I need to back off the edge and recognize that within that there's, this is why I love Tantra as a philosophy. So you've got the essence of Tantra is the fire and the nectar. So your growth edge is in the fire. That's where the transformation is. But equally, the fire can destroy and can flame out of control. And we equally need the nectar to know when to draw back and to extract the essence, so that then we've got more energy to go back into the fire. It's that constant balance, the constant push and pull, and that's the yin and the yang. The one holds the other. The one can't exist without the other. And then it creates this sammelana, this intermingling of the two parts, which actually aren't really separate. They just become each other, and there's this constant flow and movement through life, which is really how we navigate, which is why these tools are so important, to enable for the trust in the body, to know where life's taking us. And when we disconnect, when we dissociate, that's when we become easily influenced, when we become manipulated, and maybe putting our faith in the wrong things, rather than going back into trusting your own instincts, which is, learning to trust in your whole body. And I remember it was about 2 years ago now, and I like Chris Evans. I listened to the Chris Evans breakfast show, have done for many years, and he said something, and I do think he's a yogi. He said, learn to listen to your body when it whispers, so you don't have to hear it when it screams. And
Yeah.
so many times we just go into, it's like, oh, my body's really done something. It's like, but it's actually, what were the little signals that you ignored? How many times did you have a headache that you just popped paracetamol for, when really, this other analogy is just popping a masking tape over the engine light when the engine light's flashing up. And then suddenly we suddenly blame body for cutting out on us, when actually there was many signals there that we just chose to disregard.
Yeah, I love that. I think the secret witch often experiences things like pain and chronic illness. And I know that's certainly part of my own journey, and what kind of woke me up. I guess I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and that was kind of my almost awakening. And it feels to me like it's very much a process of almost just becoming more conscious about your body, in order to be able to choose again, choose a more soul aligned path. But I guess kind of when you're starting that, we talked a little bit about fear, and I liked what you said there about kind of meeting your edge, and I wondered whether you could talk a little bit to that, because I think people often will avoid kind of walking this path because of fear, whereas actually we can begin to see through practices that kind of reconnect us with the body that actually we get to choose our edge, and can do that in a more conscious way in order to live a more soul aligned path. I guess when we're unconscious with fear, it kind of almost rules us, whereas we can still choose into walking a path that might feel scary. But if it's soul aligned, then it's still a fear that's worth creating that autonomy for our nervous system to be able to walk, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. And you said something that I thought was interesting, because in terms of we choose our edge, I don't know if we do, I know what you mean when you say that. And yet we have these experiences and these challenges that arise in life that are why we practice. Because it's like, I love what Carl Jung says, and he says shadow work is the path of the heart warrior. And to truly know ourselves is to be able to dive into the places that we don't want to look at, to dive into those places that are challenging to see. And yet when we begin on this path, I think we get stuff thrown at us, and it's like once you dip your toe in the water, there's no going back, is my experience of it.
That's my experience, but more because I'm a bit of a sadist with developing and growing. But I do know also what you mean, because it's like you kind of get that, like you said, the experiences that you need in order to expand.
Yeah, I think we do. And it's also, there's all sorts of different ways you can look at this, and different theories about this. I mean, people talk about soul contracts, that you encounter people in your life that are there to help you to unveil the things that you need to grow on in this life. And it's why we experience similar experiences over and over again with different faces, that different people come into your life who give you a similar experience, because you've not yet learnt the lesson that you were supposed to have learnt before, and that kind of reoccurrence. So it's, in a way, do we choose our experiences? I think there's not really a simple answer to that. I think it's more nuanced. I think we do and we don't. I think there's like, this is why I love philosophy, in the sense that there is karma, there is the causation aspect. I've done this, so therefore I'm going to get this, whether it's from a past life or this life, or we're creating our karma constantly. And at the same time, there is this aspect of Leela, which is just the randomness, the play of the goddess, the play of the universe, which is is really just about luck. Yes, there's an element of karma, but like, you know, it's maths as well, because in maths, not that I'm a mathematician, but you know, there is the sense of randomness.
In my experience, it's kind of different, because I see that we are constantly creating our lives, and that often when we unconsciously create our lives, that's when we kind of get the experiences like we're talking about, that might be perceived more negatively, I guess. But as we begin to kind of refocus, we get to choose our lives into creation. That's kind of how I see it. So it's interesting. I love a different opinion.
Yeah, well, I think you're not wrong there at all, and I think there's room for both sides in this, because this is where I totally get what you're saying in terms of we're creating because of the stuff that's driving the ship in the background, the shadow. And that's, you know, it's good to have the definition. I had a dialogue with someone recently, and I was using the word shadow, and they thought shadow was something really evil, and I was like, no, I actually had to go back and explain shadow work in the sense of Jungian work. And you know, shadow is the stuff that we have inside of us that is hidden, the stuff that we can't see or we don't want to see. And yet there's the like the toxic shadow, but there's also the golden shadow, the stuff that we press that's amazing about us, like Marianne Williams's quote about, who are you not to shine? You know, by shining your light, you give people permission to shine their light too. And I think that's absolutely beautiful and so true. Because by the biggest gift you can give anyone is by being your full self, because then you're giving other people permission to be their full self. Now, that in this sense, the stuff that's driving the ship, the shadows, the shadow stuff that's in the background, when we become more aware of the shadow, and it's never a complete task, because there's always stuff, you know, there to look at, is the lifelong work. When we become more conscious of that, it doesn't mean that the challenges aren't still going to happen, because there's the randomness of life. We can't stop death, we can't stop the changes of things that happen in a pandemic. There's all of this random, or not so random depending on your view, that gets thrown into
laws of life in a way.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then it's like, it's having enough awareness of yourself and trusting in the instincts of your body to be able to see, okay, where am I coming from with my reaction to this? It's having the confidence to pause, to take a moment, to feel into your body guidance system, because that's how I see my body now. It's like my GPS, like I call my heart compass now. And it's like, I had to move house during my in lockdown. I had no idea where to move, and something that had become a big thing for me was wild swimming. So I followed the water to where I was swimming, and ended up living in an area that was close to water that I could swim in. And that for me was me following the compass of my heart and my body telling me where to go, and just having that trust in my own in my body just guiding me. And that's why, thinking about it in this way, having enough, doing enough work on yourself so that you have an essence of what shadows are there, including the shadows, you know, be willing to accept that there's still stuff that we don't know, and a willingness to go beyond the beyond. So there's always something behind the thing that we think it is. So that thing that we think is driving the ship, then it's kind of, oh, what's behind that, and what's behind that, and then what's behind that. And not being afraid of that, because then we do have things thrown at us all the time that we have to deal with. And something I've been saying in my classes lately is, you know, this illusion of, I'll do this when I'm ready. We're never ready. You're never ready. You're just like, I'll do it when I'm ready. And ready is an illusion. So it's just having the faith that this is it, seeing every challenge. One thing, I did my children's yoga training many years ago with Jo Manuel, a beautiful human being. And I remember her always saying at that point, challenges aren't challenges, they're blessings. So every challenge that comes, see it as a blessing. So and almost taking a deep bow to the universe. Thank you for giving me this lesson, whatever you're trying to show me, and having the faith in your resources and your toolkit that you can handle whatever this is, because there's going to be a great learning in whatever it is. So I hear what you're saying in terms of how we create our
Yeah,
reality.
within the natural laws of life, I think is
Yeah, yeah.
like you're saying. Yeah, no, I agree, and I love how you've highlighted that. Actually, it's almost like feeling into where is this emotion coming from? Like, is it coming from something that's natural, which kind of, although it can be, say, something for, I give the example of like grief, that would be something to kind of honor and tend to, but it would feel almost more open, I guess, whereas fear, which is coming from shadow, would feel maybe more closed. So that's kind of my way of navigating those two differences.
Yeah, I think emotions are very complex, and this is why I think emotional intelligence is a key part. So working with shadow is very important, and emotional intelligence, and not labeling emotions as good or bad, because that and don't get angry, don't cry. I grew up in a household that as soon as you started to cry, it's like everything was done to make things better. It's like when you need to be allowed to express what you need to express. So yeah, emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, I think, is really key. So to develop that relationship with your emotional system and how that is in your body, because people express things differently, and how it expresses in your body is very different. So taking time to be with that, to get quiet, to explore what those aspects are in your body. And that's why again, working with tantric philosophy, I think, is particularly helpful. Something called rasa theory, and the rasas are the juiciness, it's the essence of life in terms of the emotive life. And that's where the classical yoga path slightly partitions from tantra, in that tantra is the path of the householder. The aesthetic, the yogi who goes into a cave is about transcendence, about cutting off from the emotions that they think are pulling them into the body, and they're trying to transcend that, where actually the tantrika is about feeling into everything, being with everything that arises, and having that equanimous sense and equanimous state. But and that's where you've got this holding the tension of the opposites, as my teacher Siana Sermon says, and holding the paradox of being able to feel everything that arises, but without holding or paying attention to any one thing over the other, so that you are fully present to the whole of the experience, the moment, and yet recognizing that we have these challenging experiences, and to be able to digest them, so that then, as my other teacher Harish Wallace says, it becomes food for the energy body. So whether it's something people talk about, oh, it's toxic energy, he says, oh, well, he doesn't think there's any such thing. You've just got energy, and some energy you can digest and some energy you can't. And it's working out, is that energy that you can digest, your energy system, because it's not, calling it toxic is just an opinion. So then how do you so then how do you, because then we kind of, that's almost like a victim mentality mode. And that I was in that space for a long time, believe me, with various different relationships, and it's not helpful. If you just think, okay, how can I digest this experience that's happened, and how can I extract the blessing energy, so that then it becomes the nectar for life. And that's the alchemy.
Yeah, exactly. And I always talk about how important it is to bring love to everything and welcome everything, because it really does help us to, again, go into the darkness, I guess. Yeah, it feels like you're talking about the kind of being a lot of love brought to everything that arises, and it all being welcome.
Absolutely, yeah. So not pushing anything away, but also not grasping to anything, because they're both just inverse reactions to creating a block in the heart. So whether we grasp or whether we push, it creates the same energy, which is basically attachment or aversion, which are just different ends of the same spectrum.
Yeah. I was wondering if there were any other practices or rituals that you would invite secret witches to take part in. What would be useful if they were feeling maybe fear and resistance to even just kind of feeling into their bodies?
It's a good question. Things that I can't speak for everyone because I think everybody is different, but the things that I do that I've found greatly helpful in times where I'm feeling contracted and not feeling connected to my heart. I actually go and physically feel the root of my heart. So by bringing my fingertips to my sternum and having that visceral connection with my body, so tapping down the center of the chest until I get to the base of the sternum, where you've got the cartilage point where the ribs begin to separate, and I feel into that. I give it a little poke and massage, and it's very tender now. I'm feeling it. And this, they call it the hridaya, the root to the cave of the heart, and feeling into that space. And the antidote for fear is love. And so try and remind myself to go back into a sense of trust. What is making me feel contracted? And then how can I bring that back into the heart? And what I love about this in terms of the yin and the yang theory, to bring it back into that essence of yin yoga, is that the ultimate yin is the element of water, which is in the kidneys. And the emotion, the emotive quality that's connected to that is fear. And the ultimate yang is the heart, which is the fire, which is love. And so you've got this again, it's holding the tension of the opposites. So the antidote for the fear is to pour love into it. So, and going back into that essence of the heart, and almost going into, I then go back into almost like the shadow work, the inner child work, where's that fear coming from? What is it something that's connected to a past? Is it a memory? Is it evoking something, a similar feeling of something that's happened previously? Or is it a worry? Is it because of anxiety based on not trusting? And then how can I bring myself to coming back into trust and actually being able to recognize, is this a bodily signal that I need to be listening to, and give myself permission to be quiet, to feel all of that. And often that can, I go through these little steps of, first of all, feeling into my heart, and then what are the things that help me to ground my heart? And that is being, for me, swimming in the water, because water is my element. So I like going and swimming in the wild, and that helps to reconnect me and to feel more connected and trusting in the flow. To put my hands on the earth, to hug a tree, the cliche things that people talk about. And it's one of those things that if you haven't done it, you just need to experience it and see how it works for you, and let go of the concept, because there's a lot of conceptions about it. Oh, how am I going to look? Am I going to look silly? And letting go of all of that and being able to just truly be present in that moment with that tree, with the water, and then you end up with that kind of sense of connectedness with the outer, the inner, as within, so without, as above, so below, as the universe, so the soul. So it brings you back into that interconnectedness with yourself, but also with the field around you.
Yeah, I love that. That's gorgeous. And definitely being in nature, I think, is something to be recommended. It's something very yeah.
And the other things that, I kind of do it without thinking about it now, because it's been part of my life for so long. Like right now, I've been holding a crystal as we speak, and it's just little things like I'm constantly constantly got a crystal in my hand, and multiple in my bag at any one point in time. And it's also being aware of, how we are in our moon cycle. Where are we? What's coming up astrologically? Are we in that releasing phase? Are we in that waning part, going into the dark phase of the moon? Are we in the waxing phase as the light is growing? And being able to look to that very elegant cycle that's in nature, that's outside of us, but also really connects us to us as well, and looking at what, are these fears actually coming from a rational place within me, or is it something that's being sparked from the collective consciousness that's around me? Is it bigger than me, which we're all swimming in this see of each other and picking up on each other all of the time. So then it becomes about something that's bigger than you, but it also could just be you. And then it comes back to that being, am I projecting? Taking time to reflect and then have that honest self check-in with the multiplicity of layers of possibilities, and it's quite possibly a combination of many things as well. We quite often want to have an answer and it has to be that one thing, and it's a lot more nuanced than that. And that's why having these multiple tools that we can draw on, it can be helpful, and to be okay with there not being a conclusion, to be okay with not knowing, but feeling into moment by moment without actually, do I have to have an answer right now?
Yeah, gorgeous. Wow, yeah, we've covered a lot there. Kind of so often focus on, like you say, what we perceive as more negative sensations in the body as well. It's kind of our temptation to go, oh, this doesn't feel quite how I want it. What about the role of kind of things like pleasure and desire in our bodies? Is there anything you have to say to that before we end?
I think that's a really good question as well, and that's again why I really like the tantric path, because something Douglas Brooks says is, life is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be savored.
Yeah.
And it's part of it, like, goes back to something I said earlier, being with everything that arises without paying attention to anything in particular. It's like the attachment and the aversion, we grasp onto the things that we like the pleasure and the desire, more, at the exclusion of pushing the other stuff away. And actually the practice is to be able to hold the two. Like they talk about in Taoism, the 1,000 arrows of suffering. We need 1,000 arrows of suffering to have 1,000 arrows of joy. And it's holding the balance of it all. So absolutely full expression of desire and passion and all of the wonderful things that feel great, but equally not pushing away the things that don't feel great, because then we have that imbalance. So it's being able to hold the balance of it all and recognize that all of it is just part of this juice, this experience of life, and everything that life has to offer in its great complexity. And that is the path of the householder, as they say, being able to have rich experience.
It just really kind of reinforces that without kind of being able to experience all of the stuff that we don't necessarily want to experience, we can't also feel the richness and the joy that goes along with feeling, I guess. So
it's with the fire that you have that kind of transformation, because with fire comes heat, but equally you get the glow of the fire, but you can't have the glow without the heat. And so it's that like having the pressure cooker of the earth, the natural pressure cooker of the earth, where you've got the heat and the compression of coal that creates a diamond, but you can't create the diamond without that heat and that power.
And I also think you can't create really magic without a body, so it just comes kind of full circle, because without our bodies there wouldn't be anywhere to create magic and transformation. So and
then it's like the body, the individual bodies that we have are just a microcosm of the macro of the body of the earth that we float around on, and then the body of the universe, the solar system, and then the universe, and it extrapolates out and out and out and out and out. So it's part of the magic and the mystery.
Love that. Gorgeous. Well, thank you ever so much for all of that. That was I can't wait to go and listen to this again, which I'll be doing because I'll be editing, but I'm excited for that. So thank you very much for sharing. And
no, thank you. I've really enjoyed chatting, and so sometimes when stuff's coming through and I jump from topic to topic and it doesn't come out so eloquently, so apologies if it's not quite.
No, it's just as it needs to be. So thank you so much. Where can people find out more about you?
I have a website, nadapriya.com, which is, or Google Charlie Merton and you'd get my website. I'm on the
I'll put them
media
in the show
channels.
notes. Yeah, I'll put them in the
Thank
show
you.
notes so that people can find you as well. So yeah, but definitely. And I'd highly recommend one of your yoga classes and sound baths as well. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much.
I just adore Charlie. My key takeaways are: we can become very disconnected from our bodies in our trauma, and this leads us to disassociate and go away to some other planet. This is a defense mechanism, a way of checking out, and it's common, often especially when we feel everything so very deeply. We can tell what's for us and what's not from the sensations in our body. Often we ignore these, but even still, we know on a deep soul level, we just often ignore it. This might show up as asking for permission for what's really aligned for us. For example, Charlie shared her own unique experience of wanting permission from her parents to not get married, because we're so used to people pleasing and often don't have enough faith in our own power. If we don't listen to our bodies, we will pay the price through the manifestation of dis-ease in the body. For example, being unable to breathe, suffering panic attacks, and unpleasant sensations and illness, and even accidents that may wake us up and crack us open. At any point though, we can begin to again learn to tune in and listen with our body guidance system, our heart compass, and trust our soul's instincts to be able to feel into different things in life. The way to listen in is really unique and individual, but we can begin to openly, lovingly, and curiously listen to sensation as a messenger about the mystery of ourselves. A good question to ask is, how is my body responding to this? And we can ask this question of everything, including whether we are following our soul's path. We need to create safety for ourselves to feel everything. Digesting our emotions is a practice, and emotional intelligence is a skill for life. Bringing our awareness to basic level sensation is a powerful practice to create autonomy within our nervous system, and we get better at feeling and welcoming all feelings and working to our edge. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.